is going to be a big distress that is going to come into Asia, a big disease. The stress of disease is coming. The Lord took me into a hospital. It's a very big distress there. You see a lot of people swarming into the hospital. I see the lack of equipment now. There is no equipment. The doctors are running up and down, and many people flooding into the hospital. And I see a lot of people rushing into the hospital, being rushed with the procedure being done on somebody. And then there is testing. So somebody told me, well, he makes one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, "We don't have equipment. What we do, we take this and we take a little and put on the culture to see." So there is going to be a big distress that is going to come into Asia, a big disease. The stress of disease is coming, a disease emergency measure.
The world is experiencing unprecedented events right now as the coronavirus pandemic affects the lives of millions of people. Governments are putting cities into lockdown, and they are urging everyone to avoid public spaces and to work from home if possible.
A city of 11 million people in lockdown. More than 2,000 dead, tens of thousands infected. Rising anger over how the crisis is being handled. The coronavirus outbreak sparked a global emergency.
China is on a war footing. Video on social media shows streets in Wuhan, where the virus originated, being sprayed with disinfectant.
This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, live from New York, I'm Zain Asher. Welcome to the show. I want to begin with some breaking news out of Italy. All of Italy is now on lockdown. All of Italy is now on lockdown over the coronavirus. Italy's Prime Minister making the announcement at a news conference. Once again, all of Italy is now on lockdown, according to the Prime Minister.
Life in Italy has officially crawled to a halt.
Italy has now had nearly 28,000 cases, with more than 2,100 deaths.
More cases are now being reported every day than were reported in China at the highest of its epidemic.
And now Italy's health service, one of the best in the world, is overwhelmed. There can be no funerals in Italy, only names in the paper. Pages and pages of obituaries for those claimed by corona. The dead laid to rest unaccompanied, their mourning families, some of the millions still stuck at home.
Hello again, the headlines on Al Jazeera.
From Rome to Madrid and Manila, millions of people now under lockdown or funneled through checkpoints. The coronavirus has the world on a war footing, authorities battling an invisible enemy that's threatening a global recession.
COVID-19 has silenced entire cities. This is the tourist metropolis of Venice. Now look at it.
The CDC tonight says Europe is the new epicenter of the epidemic, with 70% of new cases originating here. And countries are falling like dominoes, one shutting down after another.
France, Spain, and Germany now locking down their countries.
Spain on lockdown. The Prime Minister announcing that people are banned from leaving their homes with just a few exceptions, like going to work, buying food, or going to the hospital.
In the Spanish capital, Madrid, military were on the streets telling people to go home.
The country's reported a jump of more than 2,000 in coronavirus cases in 24 hours. Now people will only be allowed to leave their homes to buy food and medicine.
As the noon deadline passed, the normally bustling Champs-Élysées was almost deserted. The famous shops and pavement cafes of Paris shuttered by orders of the French president. Only essential movement is allowed now, and non-essential activity is being punished with a fine of more than $50. Across France, 100,000 extra police are enforcing a lockdown which extends beyond the streets and into the home of every citizen.
Ireland now closing schools. The Irish Prime Minister today with President Trump.
We need to do this for a couple of weeks to make sure the virus doesn't spread.
It feels like this week was when it changed for Britain. Just 7 days ago, life was almost normal. Now, many are wondering when life on these islands will be normal again. The government intends mass gatherings will be banned from next weekend.
Boris Johnson says we're facing the worst public health crisis in a generation.
More families, many more families, are going to lose loved ones before their time.
Denmark will close all non-vital public institutions as the coronavirus spread escalates. Schools, universities and daycare centres will be shut in the coming days, and all employees with non-critical jobs are to be sent home starting Friday. Gatherings over 100 people will also reportedly be prohibited.
Denmark announced it is closing its borders to foreigners from tomorrow.
Germany, the economic powerhouse of Europe, responded to the crisis on Monday by restricting public gatherings and tightening its borders with Austria, France, Switzerland, Luxembourg and Denmark.
We have to understand the virus is here. There's no immunity from it. 60 to 70% of the population could be infected if the situation continues.
Several of Germany's neighbours, including Denmark, Poland and the Czech Republic, already closed their own frontiers.
The government of the Philippines will extend quarantine measures beyond Manila to the entire island of Luzon. The capital is effectively locked down with travel restrictions in place to try to slow the rate of infection after a spike in the number of confirmed cases.
And we have breaking news out of Malaysia. Malaysian Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin has announced a nationwide lockdown to curb the spread of COVID-19 in the country. Now, this comes after the number of cases in Malaysia surged past 500.
Lebanon's government ordered a lockdown. Private and state institutions are closed as daily life slowly grinds to a halt. It's the latest measure to stop the spread of coronavirus. The country will be sealed off from Wednesday with the closure of airports, ports and borders.
Look at the Middle East now. Iran has closed 3 of its holiest sites to visitors despite strong opposition from protesters. Shrines in the city of Mashhad, Qom and Shahr al-Rey were shut down to contain the spread of coronavirus. And Iran has temporarily freed about 85,000 prisoners in response to the pandemic. Last week, the UN asked Tehran to release them to help stem the spread of the virus.
In Iran, there are reports from hospitals of a big spike in deaths. Mass disinfection is underway at mosques and on public transit. Schools are closed and many flights to and from Iran have been canceled.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency.
President Trump announces a new $50 billion effort to fight the coronavirus. The big focus, increasing testing.
Cancellations and shutdowns across the U.S., all in an effort to stop the spread of the coronavirus.
The city that never sleeps
is waking up to a new reality. Late on Sunday night, the mayor of New York tweeted that nightclubs, cinemas, theatres and concert venues in the city must close.
San Francisco Mayor London Breed tweeting moments ago that effective at midnight, San Francisco will require people to stay home except for essential needs. Surrounding counties making up the Bay Area will also be placed on this lockdown.
Tonight, some American cities virtually shutting down. In New York, the governor closing the public school system, saying it's the safest thing for the 1 million plus children. The entire state of Ohio closing all bars and restaurants beginning at 9 p.m. tonight. Illinois also ordering restaurants to close to customers and only serve takeout. The state of California shutting down all bars and wineries and calling for home isolation for everyone 65 and over. In South Boston, the same reality. Business at bars and restaurants halted. In New Orleans, police clearing iconic Bourbon Street last night after an order went out to clear the area. Drastic measures taken in New Jersey. In Teaneck, officials declaring an emergency, encouraging all residents to self-quarantine.
Now, Canada has just announced that it's closed its borders to all foreign travelers as it works to contain the virus. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says any citizens showing symptoms of the illness will not be allowed to board a flight home.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau remaining in isolation with his family, as we mentioned, after his wife tested positive for coronavirus last week, triggering a lot of concern within the country as numbers of people testing positive grow.
We now have in the country 7 confirmed cases.
Government offices, businesses, and companies are encouraged to allow employees to work from home.
Many Kenyans in the city rely on casual labor for their daily income and do not have adequate medical insurance. They woke up to these headlines and are afraid things could get worse.
People are bracing themselves for a potential total lockdown if the disease continues to spread.
And Australian cities could be placed into lockdown as authorities continue attempts to stop the spread of the virus. A ban on large public gatherings will kick in tomorrow as schools across the country prepare for the possibility they too could shut down.
Schools are closed. Airline traffic is nearly paralyzed. Latin American countries are moving quickly towards total isolation.
We are closing all our borders and no one will be able to enter Argentina except citizens and permanent residents.
Peru's President Martín Vizcarra went a step further, announcing a state of emergency and mandatory home isolation. In neighboring Chile, the country with the highest number of confirmed cases per capita in South America, President Sebastián Piñera announced all borders will be closed starting Wednesday to give tourists time to leave. But that wasn't soon enough for these angry residents of Punta Arenas on the southern tip of South America. They shouted, "No more tourists," in front of a cruise ship that was granted permission to disembark passengers.
Venezuela has entered its first day of quarantine as Latin America escalates its fight against the pandemic. Military checkpoints have been set up on main roads into Caracas with armed officials ensuring people wear masks before entering supermarkets. All schools have been closed. There have been 17 confirmed cases of the virus in the country.
The city of Daegu is at the center of an outbreak of the coronavirus that has the whole of South Korea worried. The mayor has ordered everyone to remain at home, bringing the city of 2.5 million to a virtual standstill.
Schools here in Hong Kong have been closed since January and will remain shut until at least the 20th of April. Japan too has announced that it will shut all schools.
All right, we've got this breaking news. Rome's Catholic churches have now been ordered to close, all of them, because of the coronavirus. This is a move believed to be unprecedented in modern times.
Tonight, as millions of Americans search for comfort, places of worship are taking unprecedented steps. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is suspending all public gatherings worldwide. From Chicago to Detroit, mosques are canceling Friday prayers. In New York and New Jersey, some synagogues are doing the same for Shabbat services. In Washington, D.C., Episcopal churches, including the National Cathedral, are shutting down for at least 2 weeks.
Right now, the future's not looking good. The world economy is expected to grow at its slowest rate since 2009, after the global financial crisis. That means less wealth and fewer jobs.
This is CNN Breaking News.
In the meantime, the coronavirus pandemic has contributed to a major stock market sell-off, and today we saw history and high anxiety for investors here in the US. The Dow Jones plunged more than 2,000 points. That is how the Dow Jones ended the day. It is the biggest drop in a single day ever, so you're witnessing history being made here, and it was the biggest percentage loss since way back in 2008.
The travel industry is among those hardest hit, with airlines grounding planes and slashing jobs. Tourism operators fear the bill could run into the trillions.
As concerns over the coronavirus grow and some countries restrict gatherings, tourists are also changing their plans, some even putting their summer vacations on hold. Some airports have turned into ghost towns. The International Air Transport Association warns the outbreak could cost airlines as much as $113 billion in revenue. According to a Washington Post article, many travel experts and industry executives are comparing the current industry upheaval to that of the September 11th attacks, because fear and uncertainty are driving consumer behavior and keeping people at home.
As the nation focuses on how to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, millions of American workers are wondering if their jobs are on the line. On the front lines, hundreds of thousands of airline workers. The unprecedented cuts to flights already hurting their paychecks. Major airlines canceling even more flights to and from Europe. And it's not just aviation. For the first time, several cruise lines are suspending operations. Royal Caribbean and Norwegian joining Disney Cruise Line, Princess and Viking Cruises in suspending operations. The voluntary suspensions ranging from 3 weeks to 2 months.
Organised sport, both professional and amateur, across much of the UK, came to a standstill because of the outbreak.
Whether it's football, rugby, golf or Formula One, world sport has come to a standstill. This morning, after an emergency meeting, the Premier League finally confirmed an unprecedented shutdown until at least early April. The decision followed the news that Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta had tested positive for coronavirus. Callum Hudson-Odoi then becoming the first player to confirm he had the disease.
So there's going to be a big distress that is going to come into Asia. The Lord took me into a hospital. It's a very big distress there. You see a lot of people swarming into the hospital. I see the lack of equipment now. There is no equipment. The doctors are running up and down, and many people flooding into the hospital. A big disease, the stress of disease is coming, a disease emergency measure.